They tied her to the stake before the sun broke the horizon. The sky was still inked with the last shades of night, and frost clung to the dry grass like death refusing to let go. The girl didn't scream. She didn't beg. She only stared ahead, eyes wide and unblinking, as the rough hemp rope bit into her wrists and ankles. Her name was Eliza Monroe, and she was 19 years old. The flames weren't lit yet, but she could already smell the smoke. It was in their breath, their eyes, their hearts. A crowd had gathered, silent, except for a cough here and there or the shifting of boots on dirt. No one cheered. No one wept. The settlers of Coyote Ridge had decided justice was best served with fire and silence. Eliza scanned the faces. Most looked away when she caught their gaze. Except one. Reverend Monroe stood beside the sheriff, hands folded neatly over a worn Bible, lips moving silently in prayer. He didn't blink when he looked at her. He didn't flinch. His expression was a mask of rigid righteousness, but Eliza knew what lay behind it. Fear. Not of her, but of what she represented. Of the girl who had not died in the raid. Of the girl who came back changed. Sheriff Briggs adjusted his belt, the leather creaking as he shifted from one foot to the other. "Reckon we're ready," he muttered. "She's confessed," someone whispered. "She didn't need to," said another. "She survived what no Christian girl could." The firewood was stacked high beneath her feet, dry mesquite branches snapped by calloused hands. She had watched them build it, unable to move, mouth gagged, heart trying to slow its panicked rhythm. She didn't know if it was shame or anger that burned hotter in her chest, but neither was going to save her now. She remembered waking up on the edge of the ravine 3 days ago, her body broken, face bloodied, but alive. The attack had come fast, arrows in the night, war cries that split the air, and screams that never seemed to end. She remembered crawling from the wreckage of the wagon, dragging herself through mud and brush, guided only by instinct and the fading glow of fire behind her. She should have died. Everyone else had. Her father had buried the others the next morning. When she stumbled back into town, barefoot, wild-eyed, and wearing a torn deerskin blanket someone had left on her, he didn't run to her. He stepped back, made the sign of the cross, and called for the sheriff. Now here she stood, not before a jury, but before a pyre. A dog barked in the distance. A child cried, quickly hushed. The wind carried the scent of smoke from a nearby chimney, and it made her gag. No one moved to stop this. No one questioned how a girl could survive an Apache attack unless she had been spared or welcomed. The Reverend stepped forward, Bible raised like a sword. "Eliza Monroe," he called, his voice slicing through the morning like a butcher's knife. "You stand accused of treachery, of consorting with savages, of witchcraft and fornication with the devil's kind. Have you anything to say before God's judgment is rendered?" The gag was gone now. Her throat felt like it had been scraped raw with gravel, but she managed to whisper, "You buried your wife," without a tear. The crowd rustled like dry leaves in a sudden wind. His jaw tightened. "My wife died a good Christian woman. You, child, you are something else entirely. I'm still your daughter." "You were," he said coldly. "But I will not let a devil wear my daughter's face." Briggs looked uneasy now. Should we let her speak more? Last words. Reverend Monroe snapped the Bible shut. She's had all the words she ever needed. Briggs hesitated. Then he gave a nod to the boy holding the torch. The flame flared to life, small at first, then hungry. It licked the dry grass, teasing it, coaxing it. Eliza didn't flinch. Her legs were trembling, but she stood tall, or as tall as a girl could, bound at the ankles. She thought about the boy she tried to help last summer, an Apache child barely 13, lying wounded in the dry creek bed with a bullet in his leg and eyes too proud to beg. She'd brought him water, stitched his wound, said nothing to anyone. He vanished the next day. Maybe someone saw. Maybe the town guessed. Or maybe they just needed a reason. Her lips cracked into a small, bitter smile. "You're afraid," she said softly. "Not of me. Of what I survived. Of what that means." The Reverend's eyes flickered. Just for a second. Then he turned his back on her. The fire caught the edge of the kindling now. Small tendrils reached upward, wrapping the wood in orange tongues. Smoke curled toward her face. The girl did not scream. She closed her eyes. She listened. At first it was the wind. Then the shuffling of boots. The sharp cry of a hawk overhead. And then drums. Distant, but growing. A slow, thunderous rhythm rolling across the plains like a coming storm. Eyes turned. Faces twisted in confusion. Then fear. The drums weren't just sound, they were a warning. Then came the hoofbeats. Fast. Relentless. Horses barreling through dry earth like cannonballs. A voice cried out, one of the lookouts on the ridge. Riders. East side. The fire flared. Someone dropped the torch. Another screamed. Chaos erupted. From the trees beyond the hills, they emerged, figures on horseback, faces painted, arrows notched, rifles raised. Apache warriors, no more than 20 strong, but moving with purpose, with fire in their eyes. The townspeople scattered like rats. Briggs drew his pistol, but dropped it when a spear thudded into the dirt near his feet. A man took an arrow to the shoulder and toppled into the fire. The flames roared higher. Eliza felt the heat surge upward, and for the first time she screamed. A flash of movement. A dark figure on horseback rode straight into the square. He leapt from the saddle, knife flashing, and sliced through the ropes in 2 swift motions. She fell forward, choking on smoke and heat. Strong arms caught her. Someone hoisted her over the horse, and she felt the world tilt. The wind hit her face, then the scent of leather and sweat and earth. She clung to whatever she could grab. Behind her, Coyote Ridge burned. The town that raised her. The father who condemned her. The people who cheered her silence. All of it blurred in smoke and flame and screams. They rode hard into the rising sun, the wind screaming past her ears. Her rescuer didn't speak. His chest was broad, his back straight, and though his face was turned away, something in her chest stirred. A flicker of memory. The eyes of the boy in the creek bed. Eliza wanted to speak, to ask his name, but her voice failed her. The world was fading, dimming at the edges. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the endless desert ahead, stretching wide and wild and merciless. And somehow it felt like freedom. The desert wind stung her face as the horse galloped, each hoofbeat jarring her bones and rattling her teeth. Smoke and fire blurred behind them, the scent still clinging to her skin. Eliza clutched the warrior's waist, too weak to speak, her body aching from rope burns and smoke inhalation. Her mind drifted in and out of darkness, piecing together fragmented images, the fire, the drums, the screams of the settlers, the painted faces of the Apache, and the sharp slice of a blade that had cut her free. She didn't know how long they rode. The sky brightened from violet to gold, and the morning sun crept over the horizon like a cautious observer. Around them, the other riders moved in formation, focused, silent, lethal. No one spoke, not even the one who had saved her. His back was broad, his braids bouncing against his shoulders with every movement. His hands held the reins like a man who knew no fear. By the time the horses slowed to a trot, Eliza was barely conscious. Her skin felt scorched, her throat raw, and her mind hollowed out by pain. She felt the warrior dismount, then lift her gently, as if she were no heavier than a sack of flour. He carried her toward a shaded grove nestled between sandstone cliffs. A thin stream bubbled nearby, clear and cold. She was laid on a blanket of soft rabbit pelts beside it. She blinked against the sunlight, her vision slowly sharpening. Faces hovered above her, curious, unreadable, their eyes dark and deep. One of them, an older woman with silver streaks in her braids, touched her forehead and muttered something in Apache. The warrior who'd saved her knelt beside her, his face unreadable. His name was not a mystery for long. "She remembers me," he said in slow, accented English. She should. Eliza's cracked lips moved. Chike. His lips twitched, a flicker of something between pride and recognition. "You did not forget. I remember your leg, the bullet, the creek." Her words came out like dust, weak and rasping. Chike nodded. "You saved me. Now I save you." She closed her eyes, and the relief came so sudden it almost felt like grief. The memory of the boy she'd helped, His face twisted with pain and defiance, came back in sharp detail. She hadn't known if he lived. And now here he was, a man, a warrior, pulling her from fire like she'd pulled him from blood. Others gathered, warriors with bows slung over their backs, women with sharp eyes and leather-wrapped braids, children peering around their mother's legs. She could feel their suspicion like a rising heat. She didn't blame them. She was a white girl, rescued from a town that had probably killed or hunted some of their kin. And now she was in their world. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice little more than breath. Chike looked at her for a long moment. "Because not all debts are paid in blood. Some are paid in fire." She lay still for hours, drinking water from a carved gourd and letting the shade heal her skin. The Apache gave her space, but they watched. Always. One false move and she could feel the tension snap like a trap. When she tried to sit up, her muscles screamed. Chike helped her, offering no smile, only steady hands. By dusk, a tall man approached. His face was older than the others, weathered like ancient stone. His chest was bare, marked with symbols Eliza didn't understand, and around his neck hung a feathered necklace. His presence silenced the murmurs around him. "This is Taza," Chike said. "He is the voice of our people." Taza crouched before her, studying her face without blinking. His eyes held no softness. "You come from Coyote Ridge?" Eliza nodded slowly. "Yes. You were tied to burn. Your people wanted you dead." "They are not my people anymore." A murmur passed through the small crowd. Taza's gaze never shifted. "Why?" "Because I lived." "And they did not." Eliza hesitated. "They fear what they don't understand, and what they can't control." Taza nodded once, then stood. "You are not prisoner, but you are not free. You stay. You are watched." "I understand," she whispered. That night, the camp came alive with low conversation, the smell of roasting meat, and the quiet crackle of fires. The desert was cold under the stars. Chike brought her a blanket and sat across the fire from her. "You have Apache eyes now," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" "You see pain without speaking it. You stare back at the things that would kill you." Eliza looked into the fire. "Maybe I always did." For the first time, he smiled, just a little. "Then maybe you're meant to be here." Sleep came in pieces that night. She dreamed of burning wood and her father's empty eyes. She woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, her breath hitching in her throat. When she opened her eyes, Chike was there, sitting a few feet away, watching the horizon. "You don't sleep?" she asked. "Sleep is for when we are safe." She nodded, understanding more than she wanted to. "What happens now?" "There will be talk. Some say you should go. Others say you should be given back. To the people who tried to kill me, they do not care for truth," he said. "Only for silence." By midday, a rider galloped into camp, dust trailing behind him like a serpent. He dismounted quickly, face hard, breathing heavy. He spoke in Apache, fast and sharp. The mood shifted. Conversation died. The air changed. Chike's face hardened. He walked to Taza, and the two spoke low and fast. Then he turned and walked straight to Eliza. "They come," he said. "The townsfolk." "No. Worse. Settlers with rifles and torches. A war party. They think we took you to make war. But you saved me. They do not want truth. They want an excuse." Eliza's gut twisted. "How many?" "Too many." His voice was like stone. Taza called the camp to gather. He spoke, voice strong, words flowing like wind over stone. Eliza understood none of it, but she could feel the energy, fear, defiance, readiness. A plan was forming. Some began packing. Others prepared weapons. Children were herded toward a rocky trail that led deeper into the hills. The women moved like lightning, organized and precise. Eliza tried to stand, tried to help, but her legs wobbled. "You are not strong yet," Chike said, steadying her. "But you will be. Let me help." He looked at her long and hard. "Then you must choose. If you stay, you are one of us. Not for a night, for always." Eliza looked toward the edge of camp where the children vanished behind stone. Then toward the rising dust on the horizon. The choice wasn't really a choice. "I stay." He nodded once, then handed her a knife. Its handle was bone, the blade sharpened obsidian. It felt cold and heavy in her palm. "If they come," he said, "you fight." The sun sank lower. Shadows grew long and lean. The world held its breath. The dust trail in the distance grew thicker. Eliza stood beside Chike now, her hands trembling around the knife, her heart pounding like war drums. She was no longer the girl tied to a stake. She was the storm they didn't see coming. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush and ash, mingling in the air above the Apache camp like two ghosts refusing to separate. Eliza sat near the fire, her hands curled around a bowl of stew she'd barely touched. The sky above was bruised with dusk, and the hush that fell over the camp wasn't one of peace, but of waiting. Across the flames, Taza spoke with three warriors in low, clipped tones. Their eyes shifted often to her. She didn't need to understand Apache to know they were deciding her fate. One of them, a lean, wiry man with a scar running down his jaw, turned his gaze on her with open suspicion. His name was Nantan. She'd heard it whispered earlier, when a group of women warned their children to stay clear. "You are the question none of us asked," Chike said as he sat beside her, his voice quiet. "They debate whether your presence is a blessing or a curse." "Am I either?" she asked. Chike studied her. "You are alive when they expected a corpse. That alone unsettles men." "I didn't ask to be saved," she whispered. "No one ever does," he said. "But once you are, you must decide what that life means." The stew had grown cold. She set it aside and watched the fire. The sparks danced in the wind, and she imagined they were the prayers of the dead, trying to find a sky that still listened. She thought of her mother's voice, soft and warm like the blankets she used to sew. It had been a long time since Eliza had felt that kind of safety. Taza stood and motioned for her to come. Eliza rose, knees unsteady, and walked to the center of the camp where a circle had formed. Warriors, mothers, elders, even the children gathered in silence. Nantan stood beside Taza, arms crossed, face carved from stone. "This is our council," Chike said. "You will speak, or they will speak for you." Eliza's throat tightened. Dozens of eyes stared at her. She swallowed hard and stepped into the circle, unsure if she was entering a trial or her own burial. "I don't come to hurt you," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I didn't ask for this war. I didn't ask to be saved from a fire, but I won't run from it now." Taza nodded, saying nothing. Nantan stepped forward. "You wear our blankets, eat our food, but you are not one of us. When the white men come, they will bring their hatred. You will be their reason, their excuse. You will get us all killed." Eliza met his stare. "They would have come anyway. You know that." He stepped closer. "And you? Will you pick up a weapon when they do?" "I already have." Murmurs stirred the crowd. Nantan eyed her knife, still tied at her waist. "Words are easy. Blood is harder." "Then let blood speak." He was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, he stepped back and nodded. Taza raised a hand and the circle dissolved. The verdict, it seemed, had been postponed, not denied. The following morning, Eliza rose before the sun. She helped carry water from the spring, collected herbs with the women, and even managed to saddle one of the smaller ponies with Chike's guidance. Her muscles ached, but she welcomed it. Pain meant purpose. By afternoon, the call came. One of the scouting parties hadn't returned. Taza sent a group of 5, including Chike and Nantan. Eliza followed without asking. No one stopped her. The ride was long, the terrain unforgiving. Dry creek beds gave way to jagged hills, and every shadow seemed to stretch with menace. They found the missing scouts at the edge of a narrow canyon. One was dead, arrow in his back, boots stripped. The others were gone. Chike crouched beside the body. This was done fast. No time for defense. Nantan pointed to broken branches. They were taken, dragged. Eliza stepped forward, eyes scanning the ground. A patch of disturbed dirt caught her attention. She knelt, brushing away dust to reveal a snapped leather strap, part of an Apache quiver. "Settlers?" she asked. "No," Chike said. "Scouts. Hired guns. Maybe trappers paid to do worse." The group mounted quickly, following the tracks west. Dusk fell as they reached a small grove where the trees stood crooked, as though twisted by old pain. Smoke curled from a low fire. Voices murmured in English. They dismounted and crept close. 5 men sat around the fire, grizzled and armed, their coats stitched with trophies, feathers, beads, scalps. 2 Apache prisoners knelt nearby, bloodied and bound. "We wait for sunrise," one of the men said, chewing on a strip of meat. "Then we hang the rest as a message." Eliza's pulse surged. Her fingers curled around her knife. Taza's order had been clear: observe, report. Do not engage. But watching wasn't an option now. She turned to Chike. "I'm going in." "You'll die," he whispered. "Then I won't die. Quiet." Before he could stop her, she crawled into the dark. The warriors moved with her. They fanned out, surrounding the camp like wolves in brush. Eliza circled wide and crept behind one of the trees, just feet from the nearest guard. Her breath was shallow. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She waited for the signal. It came, an owl's call. Chaos followed. Arrows flew. Men shouted. The fire exploded upward as a pot of boiling water overturned. Eliza lunged, her knife plunging into a trapper's thigh. He roared, swinging wildly, but she rolled away as Chike's tomahawk caught him in the chest. Nanton fought like a spirit of vengeance, blade flashing in the firelight. The battle was over in moments, but its impact stayed in Eliza's bones. She rushed to the captives, cutting their bonds. One of them looked up through bloodied eyes and whispered, "You're the girl from the stake." She froze. "What?" "The white girl who lived. We heard the story. They said you were burned, but you were fireproof." She didn't answer. She helped him to his feet and carried him to the horses. By the time they returned to camp, dawn had begun to bleed across the sky. Word spread fast. Eliza had fought, had saved lives, had bled beside them. Taza summoned her that evening. He stood alone near the canyon ridge, watching the sky. "You are not what we expected," he said without turning. "I'm not sure what I am anymore." "That is good. The desert does not trust those who think they know themselves." She stepped beside him. "What happens now? You will be called sister by many, enemy by more, and still others will wait for you to break." "I won't." He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Then you are no longer guest. You are Apache." She didn't cry. Not yet. The moment was too big for tears. Behind them, the camp began to sing. Not a song of joy, but of memory, of warriors returned, of bloodshed, of ancestors honored. Eliza closed her eyes and listened. For the first time in her life, she belonged. The canyon was quiet, too quiet. Eliza crouched behind the brush, her knife strapped tight against her thigh, sweat sliding down her spine beneath her rough deerskin shirt. Dawn had not yet broken, but the earth already trembled with tension. The Apache warriors fanned out along the canyon rim, their silhouettes blending with the crags and stone. No fire burned. No voices carried. The only sound was the breath of wind and the occasional snort of a nervous horse. Below, nestled in the draw where the canyon mouth widened, lay the trap, an illusion of vulnerability, an empty cart, a scattering of supplies, the remnants of a fake camp. A perfect bait for the coming storm. "They'll take it," Chike whispered beside her, his voice low and sure. "Settlers always take what they think they can own." She nodded. Her eyes had sharpened over these past weeks. She saw more in shadows now. Read movement like language. Even her fear had changed. It was still there, but it no longer rooted her to the ground. It sharpened her, fueled her. A scout had returned 2 nights ago, breathless and bloodied, with word of what approached. A full militia of 40 men armed with rifles and torches, riding under the colors of Coyote Ridge. They came not for justice, but for erasure, to finish what the fire hadn't, to take back the white girl they claimed had been corrupted by savages, and to wipe out every trace of the people who'd saved her. Now, here they were, so many of them, marching like they believed the land owed them obedience. "They'll come through the narrow pass," Nanton said, pointing toward the rocky gorge. His face was streaked with ash, his expression hard as ever. But he no longer looked at Eliza like she was a threat. He looked at her like she was a weapon. Taza moved among them silently, offering no speeches, no promises of survival. Only his presence, weathered, unyielding, resolute. Eliza adjusted her grip on the bow Chike had carved for her. She had learned to shoot, not perfectly, but with purpose. She had stood side by side with the women, skin raw from pulling bowstrings, knuckles bruised from training. She knew this wasn't just a battle. This was the line between being erased and remembered. Then the sound came. Hoofbeats. Faint at first, like distant thunder. Her heart quickened. Across the canyon, shapes emerged. Mounted men. Dust rising behind them like smoke. They rode with arrogance, upright and loud. Some laughed. One of them raised a bottle and shouted something crude. Another spat toward the ground. And leading them, riding with grim confidence, was her father. Reverend Monroe wore his black coat like armor, a rifle across his lap. His eyes scanned the canyon, hawkish and calculating. When he spotted the abandoned cart, he raised his hand. The militia slowed. Their voices dropped. Eliza's breath caught. He was real. Not just a memory, not just a nightmare. Her father, the man who'd ordered her burned, had come to finish the job. His face was the same, but his eyes looked hollow now, like something had rotted behind them. Taza signaled. A soft bird call whistled through the canyon. Then all at once it began. The first volley of arrows fell like rain, silent and deadly. Men screamed. Horses bucked. The cart exploded as a hidden keg of powder ignited, sending shrapnel and fire through the front ranks. The narrow canyon echoed with chaos. Eliza rose, arrow-notched, and released. A settler fell from his horse, gurgling as he hit the dust. Another arrow flew. Another man dropped. The militia scrambled, trying to form ranks, but they had no cover. The Apache moved like ghosts between rocks, striking, vanishing. Smoke curled up from the blast, masking the battlefield in gray veils. Gunfire barked in reply, ricocheting off stone. A bullet ripped past Eliza's shoulder. She ducked, heart pounding, lungs burning. Chike dashed beside her, firing from cover. They're panicking. Push them. Together, they moved with the others, pressing the attack. Every step forward was met with a roar of gunfire, but the enemy's formation broke like splintering wood. Some turned to run. Others stood frozen, unsure whether to fight or flee. Then she saw him, her father, dismounted, rifle raised. He was shouting orders, dragging men back into line by their collars. His voice carried like a curse. "Find the girl," he screamed. "She's the cause of all this." Eliza froze. He was looking straight at her. And then, somehow, he was running toward her, boots pounding the dust, rifle rising to fire. She dove behind a boulder as the shot cracked. Stone shattered above her head. "Eliza," his voice roared. "You're coming back with me, girl. You hear me? You think these animals will keep you safe?" She stood, shaking, arrow drawn. "You think I'm afraid of you now?" she shouted. He stopped in the open, breathing hard. "You're not my daughter." "No," she said. "I'm not." She loosed the arrow. It struck his rifle, knocking it from his hands. He stumbled back, eyes wide. Chike tackled him from the side, pinning him to the ground. "No," Eliza said quickly, "don't." Chike hesitated, fist raised. She stepped forward. Her voice was steady. "He doesn't get to be a martyr. He lives with this." Her father didn't struggle. He just stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then his mouth twisted into something between a smile and a snarl. "You'll die here. They'll leave your bones in the dust." "No," she said softly. "They'll remember me, and they'll remember who burned first." The battle was over minutes later. The survivors fled. The wounded moaned. Smoke hung in the air like judgment. Taza walked through the aftermath, silent, stoic. The Apache had won, but not without blood. Nanton limped, his arms streaked with red. One of the elders lay still, a hand clutching the feathers on his chest. A woman wept quietly as she cradled her son. Eliza sat beside Chike at the edge of the canyon, watching the sky shift from orange to gold. Her hands were dirty, her arms bruised, her spirit hollowed out and filled again. "We held them," she whispered. Chike nodded. "This time." Will they come again? Always. She looked at him, eyes searching. And us. We stay sharp. Stay ready. And we don't forget. Behind them, the warriors buried their dead. Songs rose, not loud but deep, woven with grief, pride, and something stronger than either. Memory. Eliza picked up a stone and placed it atop one of the fresh graves. Her hands shook. Taza approached her quietly. You did not break. I did, she said. But I built something in the cracks. He studied her for a long moment, then handed her a necklace, beads and carved, wood strung together with leather. You wear this, they will know. She slipped it over her neck. It was light, and yet it carried everything. As night fell, the fire was lit again, not one of death, but of warmth. Eliza sat with the others, a child curled beside her leg, head resting on her knee. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The canyon was no longer quiet. It was alive with breath, with memory, with the echoes of survival. She looked up at the stars, unmoving, eternal. She had been meant to burn, but she had chosen to rise instead. And now she would never be erased. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes, the ones they call savages are the only ones who remember what it means to be human. The room was small, barely large enough for a cot, a chamber pot, and a cracked wooden stool, but to Clara McGraw, it might as well have been a grave. Pale morning light trickled through the slatted window like weak tea, the dust dancing in it like restless ghosts. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, and the cold stone floor bit at her bare feet. She had once counted the boards in the ceiling, desperate for distraction. 43, all warped with moisture. All silent witnesses to her slow unraveling. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed. Bootsteps followed, heavy, angry. Clara didn't flinch. She'd learned not to show fear. That only made it worse. Instead, she stared at the knot in the wood on the far wall and breathed through her nose, slowly, evenly. Her heart still beat too loud, though. She hated that about her body. It never learned how to pretend. The lock turned. Keys jingled. Clara stood, her cotton dress hanging loose off her frame like a scarecrow's shroud. The door creaked open. Lemuel McGraw stood in the threshold, chewing something brown and foul-smelling. His boots were still muddy from the barn, and his eyes flicked over Clara with that same mixture of contempt and ownership. You eat yet? He asked. She didn't answer. He stepped into the room and slapped her across the face, casual, like swatting a fly. Her cheek stung, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried in weeks. I asked you a question. No, she said, voice even. He grunted and tossed a tin plate on the floor. A slab of dried beef and half a biscuit rolled off it. Clara didn't move. Lemuel leaned in close, the scent of tobacco and sweat curling in her nostrils. Ungrateful ain't you, he muttered. My brother was too soft on you. Let you read. Let you talk back. Now look at you. Thinkin' you're too good for the likes of us. Clara held his gaze, defiant. He was too good for you. That earned her another slap. Harder, this time, ringing in her ears like a church bell. Lemuel sneered, then turned to leave. Eat that, or don't. We got business tonight. Man comin' through who's lookin' to buy. Clara froze, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Buy. Lemuel chuckled as he walked away. Ain't nobody gonna feed a useless widow forever, girl. Best you start thinking of ways to be useful. The door slammed shut and the lock clicked again. She was alone with her racing thoughts, the plate of insult sitting at her feet. She sat on the edge of the cot, fingers trembling, though her face remained still. Years ago, she might have wept, but not anymore. She traced the bruise forming on her cheek and let her mind drift, not to escape, but to remember who she used to be. Before all this, she'd been Clara Winslow, daughter of a preacher, lover of books, barefoot girl who ran through creek beds and sang songs to the sky. She'd met Samuel McGraw when she was 20. He was sweet, awkward, and nothing like the stories she'd been told about his family. He read poetry to her by firelight, brought her wildflowers, built a swing on their little plot of land. He died 3 years later, caught under a spooked horse during a cattle drive. There had been blood on his boots when they brought him back. Clara hadn't even been allowed to say goodbye. They buried him under a crooked tree behind the barn, and everything changed. Lemuel and his brothers took the land, boarded up the library Samuel had built for her, and locked her away in this room. At first, she'd fought. She'd screamed, clawed, thrown plates. But no one came. The townsfolk believed she'd moved away to live with family out east. Her letters to her father never made it past the porch. After a while, the silence became a second skin. But her mind? That was hers. She had a diary hidden beneath the floorboards, pages filled with secret thoughts and careful plans. She wrote with charcoal stolen from the fireplace, words dancing between the lines of pain and hope. Each night, she hummed old hymns and traced escape routes in her mind. She wouldn't die here. The wind howled outside as the day wore on, rattling the loose window pane. Clara paced, mind sharp. Lemuel had said someone was coming. Tonight. She had to move before then. She knelt beside the fireplace, fingers probing between the stones. Last month, she'd noticed a rusted nail protruding from a loose brick. She tugged at it now, breath held, until the stone shifted. Behind it, tucked away like a gift, was the stub of an iron tool. A broken hinge, maybe, sharp on one end. Heavy enough. She held it in her hand, heart pounding. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. The sun dipped low, and the room darkened. Shadows stretched across the walls. Clara slid the tool into her dress pocket and waited. Her ears strained for sounds. Laughter from the kitchen. A dog barking. A door creaking open and then slamming shut. Lemuel and the others were likely drinking. They always did, before company. The hour crawled. Then quiet. Clara slipped the tool from her pocket and approached the window. She'd been working at the wooden slats for days now, prying at them with stolen hairpins and fingernails. Tonight, she had leverage. She wedged the metal into a split in the frame and twisted. The wood groaned, splintered. One slat came loose. Then another. She pressed her face to the gap. Cold air kissed her cheek. Moonlight. Stars. The scent of open land. Freedom. She squeezed one hand through the gap. Then her shoulders. It was tight, bruising, but she pushed through. Her feet scraped the sill, and then she was falling, softly, into a patch of weeds below. Her breath hitched. She was outside. The night wrapped around her like a blanket. Crickets sang. The barn loomed nearby. She crept through the shadows, heart hammering. If she could just make it to the creek, follow it to town. Clara. The voice sliced through the night like a whip. She turned. Lemuel stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the lantern behind him. A shotgun rested in his hands. "You stupid bitch," he spat. "Thought you could crawl outta here like a rat?" She ran. Footsteps thundered behind her. She didn't look back. The field was uneven, rocks biting into her feet, but she didn't stop. Her lungs burned. Branches slashed at her face. Then a sharp pain. A hand grabbed her hair, yanked hard. She went down hard, the wind knocked out of her. Lemuel stood over her, panting, red-faced. He struck her once, twice, until the night blurred. When she came to, she was back in the room. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. The silence returned. Her lip was bleeding, one eye swollen, but her spirit still burning. She crawled to the corner, tore up a loose floorboard, and opened her diary. Her fingers smeared blood on the page as she wrote. "Tonight I saw the stars again. I felt wind. I'm not broken. Not yet." She didn't sleep. Dawn came gray and heavy. Footsteps returned. Clara sat, back straight, hair wild, a bruise blooming along her cheekbone. Lemuel opened the door. "You're lucky he still wants to meet you," he grumbled. "Be ready. Wash your face." Clara said nothing. He left. She waited, breath slow, measured. Her fingers curled around the broken hinge in her pocket. If tonight was the night she'd be sold like cattle, then someone would bleed before it happened. And far beyond the hills, unseen and unknown to her, a rider was coming. Dust on his coat, guns on his hip, A man with his own ghosts and a knack for mercy. But for now, Clara was alone. Alone but not beaten. Dust hung in the late afternoon air, shimmering gold and red like fireflies trapped in amber. The outlaw rode slow, slouched in his saddle, the brim of his hat pulled low to shade his face from the sinking sun. His horse, a grizzled mare with a limp on her left side, plodded along as if she too were tired of the road. The trail that led into Dustwater Creek was cracked and dry, the weeds brittle enough to crumble under a breath. Jesse Coulter, known in some circles as Mercy, was not a man who smiled easily nor spoke often. His revolver had done most of the talking in his life, but he carried himself with a quiet gravity, like a man who'd seen the worst of people and chose, strangely, to still look for the good in them. A scar curved along his jaw, half hidden by Apache beard, and his eyes were pale gray, like cold ash. As he entered the town, the few folks on the street glanced his way, then looked quickly away. Not because he was feared, not anymore. He'd left that life behind, mostly, but his name still traveled faster than he did, and some stories refused to die. He didn't blame them. He wouldn't trust a man who looked like him either. He tied his horse outside the saloon and stepped inside. The place reeked of stale beer and tobacco. A piano sat untouched in the corner. The bartender, a round man with a twitchy eye, squinted when Jesse approached the counter. "Don't want no trouble," the man said automatically. "Don't aim to give you any," Jesse replied, voice dry as the dirt outside. "Just want a drink." The man poured whiskey. Jesse took it without thanks and scanned the room. A group of ranch hands played cards in the corner. An old man snored into his hat. No one of importance, until a tall man in preacher's garb stepped in from the rear room and stopped short when he saw Jesse. Their eyes met. The preacher looked startled, then curious. Jesse sipped his drink. "You look like you got something on your chest." The preacher stepped closer, face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. "Name's Ezra Winslow. I know who you are. Rode with Danvers' gang once, didn't you? Years back." Jesse didn't answer. Winslow pressed on. "They say you killed a marshal in his own home." "I didn't," Jesse said. "But I was there when it happened. Ain't proud of that." The preacher nodded slowly. "Then maybe the Lord left some mercy in you after all." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as the type to look for help in a saloon." "I don't usually, but I don't know where else to go." The preacher's voice lowered. "My daughter, Clara, she's missing. Has been for months. Word was she moved out east, but I never got a letter. Not even once. That girl wrote me every week since she could hold a pen." Jesse frowned. "What's this got to do with me?" "I think she's still here," Ezra said, voice thickening. "Still on that damn McGraw property." Jesse leaned back. "McGraw's? Ain't that where the widow lived? Samuel's girl?" Ezra nodded. "He died, 2 winters ago? Trampled in a cattle stampede." Jesse's jaw tightened. He remembered Samuel, quiet fella, always kept his boots clean and never pick a fight. Married that sweet preacher's daughter. Jesse had crossed paths with them once during a delivery. Samuel had offered him a cup of coffee and directions without a trace of judgment. Jesse hadn't forgotten that. "You saying they're holding her?" he asked. Ezra lowered his voice further. "I believe so. But no one listens. The sheriff's in their pocket. Says she left by her own choice. I've knocked. I've called. No answer. They keep the house locked up like a vault. I just know it. My daughter's in there." Jesse set his glass down. The whiskey barely touched his gut. He pulled his hat lower, thinking. He had no cause to get involved. Not really. But something twisted in his chest. A memory of a younger girl with dark hair laughing at something her husband had whispered. "Where's the property?" Ezra gave directions. Jesse listened, memorizing every turn. When the preacher finished, Jesse nodded once, tight and grim. "I'll go look," he said. The McGraw place sat on a hill east of town, half-eaten by weeds and surrounded by sagging fence lines. Jesse arrived just after dusk, keeping his horse downwind and tying her to a low branch in the tree-line. He watched the house for a long time, crouched in the brush. A lantern glowed behind a curtained window. Shadows passed by now, and then broad figures slow-moving. No sign of Clara. Jesse waited. An hour passed. Then two. Finally, a door opened. One man, big, slouched, holding a jug, stepped onto the porch. He laughed, spat, then stumbled toward the barn. Jesse slipped from his hiding spot and moved around the rear of the house, silent as a ghost. He found a window low to the ground, partially slatted with wood. Just a crack, but enough to see. A woman sat inside, shoulders straight, hair unkempt, a dark bruise painting her cheek. Her hands moved across a page in her lap, writing something with what looked like a blackened stick. Her lips moved as she wrote. Jesse's breath caught. She looked thinner than he remembered, paler. But it was her, Clara, and she was a prisoner. He crept back to the trees and waited until the house quieted, then circled to the side door. It was bolted, but old. The lock groaned under his knife and gave way. Inside, the air reeked of rot and old meat. He moved room by room, avoiding the creaking boards, ears sharp for the sound of boots or voices. The corridor was narrow, dark. He reached the door at the end, the one he'd seen from outside. He knocked once softly. A pause. Then a voice, wary. "Who's there?" "Clara," he said. "It's Jesse Coulter." Mercy. Silence. "Your daddy sent me." More silence. Then a shuffle. The door opened a crack, chains clinking on the inside. Clara's face appeared, eyes wide. "Jesse." He nodded. "Are you real?" He gave a soft smile. "I better be." She pulled the door open further. Her eyes shone, not with tears, but fury. "I was about to escape on my own." "I don't doubt it." "I'm not weak," she added. "No one said you were." They stood there for a moment, the air between them tense, heavy. Jesse glanced behind her. "You got anything you can't leave?" She shook her head. "Only what's in my head." "Good. Let's go." She grabbed a worn satchel, stuffed it with a diary, and slipped on a coat that barely fit her. Jesse led the way back down the hall, but footsteps boomed upstairs. "Clara," a voice called out. "Where the hell you at?" "Lemuel." They froze. Jesse spun, drew his revolver, and pushed Clara behind him. "I'll draw him," he whispered. "You slip out the window. Get to the tree line." "I'm not leaving without you," she hissed. "We ain't got time to argue." Too late. Lemuel rounded the corner, rifle in hand, eyes bloodshot. "You son of a bitch," he snarled. Jesse fired first. The shot rang out like thunder, tearing into Lemuel's shoulder. He went down screaming. "Go," Jesse barked, grabbing Clara's hand. They bolted through the hallway, glass shattering behind them as another McGraw cousin opened fire. Jesse kicked open the back door. Clara ducked low, running like hell toward the brush. Bullets ripped through the night. One clipped Jesse's arm, just a graze. He kept moving. They made it to the trees, heartbeats thundering. Jesse shoved Clara behind a fallen log and knelt beside her, breathing hard. "You hit?" he asked. "No." "Good." She turned, staring at him. "Why did you come?" Jesse wiped the blood from his arm, winced. "Couldn't ignore it. You don't even know me. I knew your husband. And your father. That was enough." Clara reached out and touched his shoulder gently. "Thank you." He looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "This ain't over. They'll come after us." "I know," she said. "Do you still want to run?" "No," she whispered. "I want to fight." Jesse nodded once. They both turned toward the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond it, freedom waited. Or hell. But whichever it was, they'd ride into it together. The rain came in thick sheets, hammering down from a bruised sky, drenching the land in cold and shadow. Jesse and Clara rode hard, the horses' hooves pounding muddy earth, each breath of theirs a white plume in the chilled air. The trees whipped past like blurred sentinels, branches lashing at them as if to drive them back. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to rattle bones, but neither flinched. Jesse's arm ached from the gunshot graze. Blood soaked his sleeve, sticky and warm against the cold. He didn't mention it. Clara clung to him from behind, soaked through, her teeth chattering, but her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the darkness for movement. She was no longer the silent woman in a locked room. She was watching, planning. They veered off the road and into a shallow ravine, the horse slipping in the mud but finding its balance. They followed the creek upstream, the same creek Clara had traced in her mind 100 times in that little room. Jessie had listened to her directions, trusted her memory, even when lightning made every tree look like the last. Behind them, faint but certain, came the sound of pursuit. Riders yelling, dogs barking, gunmetal slicing through the storm. The McGraws weren't letting her go quietly. Clara leaned close to Jessie's ear. "There's an old trapping shelter about a mile up the ridge. My husband built it. Used to keep salted meat and dry firewood there. If it's still standing." He nodded. "It's worth the gamble." They turned east, cutting across a narrow bluff where the path narrowed dangerously. The horse struggled against the rising grade, and Clara jumped down to run alongside, slipping and catching herself on exposed roots. Mud coated her legs, soaked into her boots, but she pressed on, helping guide the horse when Jessie's grip faltered. They reached the shelter just as the rain hit its peak. A low, moss-covered structure nestled beneath a rock outcropping, barely visible through the mist. Jessie dismounted and pulled Clara inside. The walls groaned in protest, but held. Inside it was dark, musty, but dry. Firewood sat in the corner, miraculously preserved. Clara lit a match with shaking hands. The flame flickered, caught. A soft orange glow filled the space. Jessie sank to the floor with a grunt, his back against the wall, breath shallow. Clara knelt beside him. "You're bleeding bad." "I've had worse," he muttered, wincing as she peeled back the soaked fabric. The wound wasn't deep, but it was messy, torn open by the ride. She found an old canteen, some cloth, and worked quickly, biting her lip to keep from crying. "You shouldn't have come for me," she whispered. Jessie looked at her, sweat beading on his brow. "Ain't the first time I've done something stupid." She smiled, just a little. Then it faded. "They're coming. Lemuel won't stop. He'll chase us until we're dead." "I don't plan on dying," Jessie said. "And I sure as hell don't plan on letting them take you back." Clara sat back, staring at the flickering firelight. Her hands were scraped raw, nails broken. Her dress was torn and caked with dirt. But her spine remained straight, her chin high. "I used to think if I was quiet enough, obedient enough, they'd let me be. That grief would soften them, that time would wear them down. And did it? No. It made them crueler. And it made me harder." Jessie watched her in the firelight. There was steel in her now, tempered, honed. The kind that didn't crack. Outside a twig snapped. Then another. Jessie's head jerked toward the door. Clara was already moving, grabbing the rifle stashed along the wall. Samuel's old repeater. Still loaded. Still oiled. Voices drifted in with the rain. "She's in there. Spread out. Don't shoot unless you have to. Lem wants her alive." Clara's grip tightened. Jessie forced himself to his feet, teeth gritted. He drew his revolver and took position by the narrow window slit. The shelter offered little defense. One room, one door, thin walls. It would be a slaughter if they stayed boxed in. Clara looked at Jessie. "We can't stay." "Nope. But we can make them bleed." "Now you're talking." She handed him a second rifle, heavier, meant for hunting elk. He checked it, nodded. Together, they doused the fire, plunging the room into darkness. Rain still fell in sheets outside, but now, within the storm, came the sound of footsteps closing in. Jessie moved to the door, cracked it open. Shapes flickered in the mist. 3 men, guns drawn, one with a lantern. Clara stood at the opposite wall, breath steady. Jessie waited until the lantern light moved past the shelter, backlit the men just enough to create silhouettes. Then he fired. The nearest man dropped instantly. The lantern clattered to the ground, casting wild shadows. The other 2 shouted, turned, and returned fire, bullets punching through the wooden walls. Clara fired next. Her shot rang out with a satisfying thump, another man down. The last one shouted, retreating into the trees. More voices answered, more were coming. "Time to move," Jessie said. They burst out the back, racing through the trees, sliding down the muddy hill. Behind them, gunshots cracked through the rain. Clara stumbled once, but righted herself. Jessie kept pace, every step a battle against gravity. They reached a rocky outcrop and ducked behind it, catching their breath. Jessie scanned the tree-line. Figures were spreading out. Torches. Lanterns. A net closing fast. Clara pointed to a ridge above. There's a narrow pass up there. If we can get across, they can't follow with horses. Jessie nodded. Then we climb. The ridge was steep, slick with moss and runoff. Jessie boosted Clara up first, then followed, every muscle screaming. Gunfire echoed below as the McGraws found the shelter, found their dead. Clara reached the top and dropped to her knees, pulling Jessie the final few feet. They lay side by side, soaked, shaking, alive. They won't follow us across this, she gasped. Too narrow, too high. It'll buy us time. Jessie looked at her, rain dripping from his hat brim. You sure you're not part mountain goat? She laughed. Not much, but enough to lighten the weight pressing down on them. Below, voices called out. Orders barked. But no one dared to climb. Not yet. We've got one chance, Jessie said. There's a cabin I know, tucked between two ridges north of here. Belonged to a friend. He's long gone, but the place is still there. We can hole up, heal, figure out what comes next. Clara nodded. Let's go. They traveled the rest of the night in silence, feet squelching through mud, every gust of wind biting deep. But they didn't stop. Not until the sky began to lighten, bleeding soft gold into the gray. They reached the cabin as dawn crept over the horizon. It was small, weather-beaten, half swallowed by vines. But it had walls, a roof, a door that locked. Jessie pushed it open, gun drawn, but found only dust and silence. No threats, no ghosts. He let out a breath. We made it. Clara stepped inside, eyes sweeping the space. A table, a rusted stove, a cot. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. She turned to him, then really looked at him for the first time since the escape. He looked half dead, pale, bleeding again. She moved to him, without asking, and began unbuttoning his shirt to tend the wound properly. Jessie let her. Didn't think I'd ever breathe free air again, she murmured. You did that, he said. You got yourself out. Not alone. No, he admitted. But you never needed me to save you. I just gave you the door. She leaned over, pressing the bandage into his arm, and their eyes met. The silence between them wasn't awkward now. It was something else, earned, heavy with everything said and unsaid. Outside, the rain slowed. Birds began to stir. A new day was forming. Clara stepped back and sat across from him. They'll come again. Let 'em, Jessie said, voice low. Next time we won't run. She smiled, small but fierce. We'll make our stand, she said. And in the pale light of dawn, with gunpowder still clinging to the air and the storm fading behind them, the widow and the outlaw prepared to meet whatever came next. Together. The cabin was still as a held breath, steeped in a calm that comes after a storm, but before the next strike. Clara stood at the single window, rifle cradled in her arms, watching the narrow pass beyond the trees. Jessie sat at the table, sharpening a knife, the sound of stone against steel rhythmic and slow. He wore a sling now, his shoulder bound tightly in fresh bandages, thanks to Clara's steady hands. They'd spent 3 days here, holed up in that crooked little shack with its creaky floorboards and leaking roof. The time had passed in silence, broken only by the whisper of strategy, the occasional clink of weapon maintenance, and the quiet moments in which Jessie would catch Clara staring into the fire, her eyes shadowed by thoughts he didn't dare interrupt. But she wasn't broken. Far from it. Clara had shed the skin of the imprisoned widow with every passing hour. Her voice had grown firmer, her steps more certain. She cleaned their weapons with the precision of a soldier, mapped the surrounding terrain in her mind, and when she spoke now, it was with the voice of someone who'd stopped hoping for mercy and started preparing for justice. Jessie looked up from his blade. They'll come soon. Clara nodded. I know. I want them to. He watched her for a moment, the defiance in her posture, the fire behind her gaze. Something stirred in his chest, pride, admiration, maybe something deeper. But he didn't speak it. Not now. Words were a luxury. Action was what they needed. They'd seen the signs that morning. Smoke on the horizon. Hoof prints in the soft dirt by the stream. The McGraws had tracked them. And this time, they'd brought more than torches. Jesse counted at least 6 men. Armed. Mounted. Hungry for blood. Lemuel would be among them. He would never stop. Not until Clara was dead or his again, and Jesse knew which one the bastard preferred. Clara turned from the window. They'll come through the choke point. That's our only advantage. If we can funnel them, we can hold them off. Jesse raised an eyebrow. She gave a faint smirk. You didn't think I'd sit this one out, did you? He shook his head. Not for a second. They moved quickly, laying traps along the narrow path, tripwires made of twine, buried spikes fashioned from broken branches, and oil-soaked rags ready to be set ablaze. Clara's hands never hesitated. Her mind worked faster than his, anticipating every angle. She had turned fear into focus, pain into purpose. By afternoon, the trap was set. They waited in the trees above the pass, nestled behind rocks and brush. The wind had died. Even the birds had gone quiet. Jesse laid beside her, rifle braced against a log, sight trained down the trail. Clara adjusted her grip. You think it'll work? It'll work, he said. But what he didn't say was that it wouldn't matter. Not entirely. Not unless Lemuel fell. Because until that man's blood soaked the dirt, Clara would never truly be free. The sound of hooves echoed through the canyon. Slow, deliberate. Then came the creak of leather, the clink of spurs, the rough laughter of men who thought they were invincible. 6 riders. 1 torchbearer. Lemuel rode near the front, shotgun across his lap, mouth twisted into a scowl. Jesse steadied his aim. You want him. Clara's eyes narrowed. He's mine. The first trap triggered when the lead horse stepped over the ridge. Rope pulled tight across the path. The animal screamed, crashed sideways, throwing its rider. The man barely had time to react before a spike tore through his leg. Chaos erupted. Jesse fired, dropping the second rider with a single shot to the chest. Clara moved like a ghost, rising from the brush, firing once, twice. A man fell screaming, his gun tumbling from his hand. Another took cover, yelling for the others to spread out. Then came Lemuel's voice, commanding, brutal. Push forward. They ain't but 2 of them. Another shot rang out. Clara ducked, but not before locking eyes with her brother-in-law. Recognition. Hatred. Lemuel dismounted, crouched behind a boulder, and fired blindly into the trees. Clara, he roared. You think you can kill me? You ain't got the guts. You were nothing before Samuel, and you're less than nothing now. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any insult. The remaining McGraws pressed forward, ignoring the traps. Jesse caught one trying to flank them and dropped him with a clean shot to the gut. The man wailed, rolled, then went still. Then Clara moved. She slid from the tree line and raced down the ridge, drawing Lemuel's fire. Jesse cursed and covered her, shooting at anyone who tried to follow. She moved like someone who didn't care if she lived or died, only that she ended this. Lemuel rose, grinning like a devil, and leveled his shotgun at her. Clara dove behind a rock just as he fired, pellets shattering bark and stone. She came up on one knee, aimed, and fired. Her bullet caught him in the leg. He howled and fell, blood pouring from the wound. But he didn't stay down. Clara stood, gun trained on him. Lemuel spat blood, grinning. Go ahead. Shoot me, girl. You'll always be a McGraw. Doesn't matter how many of us you kill. Her hands didn't shake. You're wrong. She stepped closer, each word like a blade. I was never one of you. You locked me away, starved me, beat me. But I didn't die. I changed. He raised his hand slowly, reaching for a pistol tucked in his belt. She fired. Once. The shot echoed through the trees, final and absolute. Lemuel's body jerked, then crumpled. His eyes stayed open, staring at nothing. The rest of the McGraw men scattered. Jesse emerged from the trees, gun still smoking, blood seeping through his shirt again. But his face held something new. Relief. Clara stood over Lemuel's body for a long time. Then she turned and walked to Jesse, face unreadable. "It's done," she said. He nodded. "It is." They burned the bodies that night, the flames high and bright against the black sky. Neither spoke much. There was no need. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in the world around them, but inside. Jesse watched Clara as the fire crackled, her face lit in gold and shadow. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like someone reborn. The next morning dawned quiet and clean. The rain had washed the earth, and the sky stretched wide and blue above the ridges. They packed what little they had and left the cabin behind, heading north on foot. A week later, they reached a stretch of land Jesse once claimed for himself. A river ran through it, and the grass swayed like ocean waves. There was no town, no neighbors, just silence and sun. They built a small house together. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a roof, and a porch that looked west. Jesse's wound healed slowly. Clara planted herbs in a clay pot. She kept Samuel's old rifle near the door, and Jesse's knife stayed within reach, just in case. But no one came. Time passed. 1 year later, on a spring morning thick with birdsong, Clara stepped out wearing a faded dress, her hair braided down her back. Jesse stood under the sycamore tree, holding something wrapped in cloth. She walked to him. Inside the cloth was a simple ring, silver, a little bent, but shining. He said nothing, just offered it. Clara took it, tears in her eyes. They married beneath the tree with the wind as witness, and the river humming softly behind them. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Clara lifted her face to the sky. For the first time in a long time, she felt no fear, no shadows behind the door, no footsteps coming down the hall, only freedom. Jesse squeezed her hand. "You still think I shouldn't have come for you?" Clara smiled. "I think I was waiting for the chance to come for myself. You just helped me take it." They stayed there a while, arms wrapped around each other, the sun climbing higher, painting everything gold. Some stories don't end in revenge or fire. Some end in the quiet triumph of survival. And for Clara McGraw, now Clara Coulter, that was enough. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Freedom's a flame. Keep it burning.